Hi there, my name is Ewan Nicholson. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Remembering Love. The subject of today's video is me giving a bit of a critique, an analysis, or a rant, depending how you want to call it, on a quote that I see doing the rounds all the time for years on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, usually on coaching websites or self-improvement websites or sites on trauma. And it goes something like this. Your wound is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. This isn't even the most egregious version. There's versions of this quote that I find even more annoying, and it's the one where they add in the word probably, like some version like this. Your wound is probably, in inverted commas, not your fault, but your healing is absolutely your responsibility. So that one does the rounds as well, and obviously they feel the necessity to add the word either probably or maybe or quite possibly, and adding the word probability is all about adding a little bit of doubt. Like, we can't say, although your healing is 100% your responsibility, no questions asked there. The wounds, maybe not, probably, okay, we'll just say they are for argument's sake. And when you add the word probability in, it just muddies it unnecessarily. So if I'm in court and I say to a judge, I should not have run that old lady over on the zebra crossing while I was drunk, that sounds very different to, I probably shouldn't have run that old lady over on the zebra crossing when I was drunk, but at the same time, you know, what was she doing there, kind of thing. So that annoys me even more, but we're not going to even look at that one. We're just going to keep to the simple and straightforward one. And what I'd like to do in this video is to kind of break down why I find it patronizing, annoying, and unhelpful. And also like to offer at the end of the video two kind of different versions that I think are more instructive and more supportive and more helpful for the people this quote is directed towards. Because let's remember, this is a quote spoken to the trauma survivor. It's saying just because your wounds aren't your fault, just because you didn't break it, doesn't mean you're not going to pay for it. So it's directed towards the trauma survivor. It's not talking about someone's personal experience. I did this or I feel that. It's saying, no, you there. Just because the wounds aren't your fault doesn't mean the healing isn't your full, total responsibility. It's a statement directed at a survivor. So the first thing is, this statement is made up of two parts. There's the acknowledgement that the trauma is not your fault, not maybe, it's just saying it's not your fault. If you endured abuse or difficulty growing up, you know, you're not to blame for that. Okay, we get that. But then it feels the necessity to add this bit in, but it is your responsibility. And what it indicates, or what it seems to point to, is that for some bizarre reason, trauma survivors have difficulty with that. That one of their big issues isn't depression, shame, anxiety, addiction, ill health, psychological pain. No, that's not their big issue. The big issue is their unwillingness to take full responsibility for the healing process, because they're busy, you know, putting it on their therapist, their family, the state, their abusers, whoever. There's got to be something out there that's going to take responsibility for my healing, not me. And that's the implication of this quote. That's what it's kind of implying. And in my experience on a personal level, and the people I know who suffer from trauma, I don't see that being people's biggest issue, their victimhood or their inability to take responsibility. It's all these other issues that I listed: the depression, the anxiety, the addiction, just the wound, the unaddressed wound that eats away at us. That's the issue, not an unwillingness to kind of get on with things and try things and endeavor to kind of move forward. So the first thing is, it's tone deaf. And secondly, it's just very paternalistic. It's very patronizing. It's really talking down to a person, assuming they don't already know this, and you have to remind them. The issue of you need to take responsibility, you need to own up to what's yours and deal with it, is the kind of tone I take with my teenage daughters when it comes to cleaning their room. You know, you need to take responsibility. This is up to you to sort out. And the only reason I would have to remind them of that is, on some level, I think they've either forgotten or they're trying to shirk something. If they have a party and the lounge room's all messy and there's games everywhere and rubbish, and I feel the need to say to them, girls, you may not have made all this mess, but it's your party, your friends, you're going to be cleaning it up. And the only reason I would have to say that to them is if I thought on some level, somewhere in their minds, they were thinking they're going to go to bed and wake up the next day and it was all going to be clean because me and their mum were going to do it. And the only reason I have to say that's not going to happen is I think on some level they thought it was. So the moment you take that tone, you're assuming something that you shouldn't. and it's patronizing, and no one likes to be spoken down to, particularly trauma survivors. And why even say that? Why add that line on? So what I'd like to do is give you two, what I think are improvements on this. And one is just a straight deletion, and one is an addition. So the adaptation is this simple adaptation. Your wound is not your fault. Your wound is not your fault. Full stop. And the reason you need to put a full stop there and not have anything else after it is that's a huge issue. Getting to the point as a survivor of CPTSD or childhood trauma where you're willing to acknowledge that it wasn't your fault, that I'm not to blame for the things that happened to me, is a lifetime's work. It's something that you have to keep coming back to, keep re-educating yourself, reprogramming yourself, re-understanding your experience of what happened and what didn't happen. I'm 46 and I still struggle with it. I've been in therapy for years and I still struggle with it. Intellectually, I know what happened to me when I was 6 or 5 or 7 wasn't my fault. But at the same time, I still feel kind of like it is. And there's emotional levels to that and unconscious levels to that, that even if I intellectually know it is, it still feels like in my body, if I say it out loud, it feels like it's still not quite right. So just getting to the point in your healing journey where you accept it's not your fault is a big deal. It's not something to just be brushed over and move on to the next thing of taking responsibility, as if acknowledging it isn't your fault is somehow separate to taking responsibility. That somehow getting to the point you feel I'm not to blame is a separate thing to taking responsibility for your healing process. And the fact that they're dislocated in that way points to the ignorance of this very quote. Yeah. So that's something to be aware of. Just getting to the point where you're able to say it's not my fault is a big deal. The average disclosure of sexual abuse for an adult is around 48, somewhere in your 40s. So imagine, why is that? Why does it take the average adult who's been sexually abused as a child 48 years to share that with another person, to disclose that? What's holding that person back? And it's that very thing. On some level, it was probably my fault. On some level, I'm to blame. And I'm going to hold all this in because on a deeper level, I feel like, who am I to say this? And that's how powerful this is. And that's how big a deal it is to get to the point where you're able to say, it's not my fault. I'm not to blame. If you remember that scene in Good Will Hunting, which is like the peak of the whole story, the whole movie, it's the climax of the story arc of the character played by Matt Damon, and where Robin Williams moves closer to him and says, after he looks at his file, and just says, it's not your fault. And he's like, oh, I can't handle that, and no, don't mess with me. No, it's not your fault. And he gets closer and closer, and it comes this very poignant, extremely touching moment in the film where he starts crying and opens up and lets the therapist in and acknowledges that he obviously was thinking it was his fault. It was a huge breakthrough moment for the character. But if you notice, what's eerily absent from that scene is, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal it. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal it. I wonder why the screenwriters didn't add that bit in. And why? Because it's obvious. It would just be so ridiculous and so out of place. So if it's out of place for Matt Damon's character, it's out of place on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Stop advertising this. Stop putting this rubbish out there, please. And the second adaptation of this quote goes something like this. Your wound is not your fault, but I have a responsibility as your brother and sister to support you, help you, love you, and care for you to the best of my ability. You matter, you're important, we can do this. I've got your back, I'm here for you. Or some version of that, some declaration of solidarity, of support, and acknowledging our responsibility to others. That our healing process isn't just this single solitary thing that we do on our own and we take full responsibility for. I know in my healing process there were moments and times where I did have to dig deep and find the courage of my convictions and get on with my healing process. But I couldn't have done that if I didn't have people around me that were taking some responsibility for me. My wife, my family, my friends, my therapist all had an emotional investment in my health and well-being, and I felt it. I felt answerable to those people. I felt they were connected to me. And are they solely responsible? No. Am I solely responsible? No. We all have responsibility to each other and ourselves, and the two things work and complement each other. But rather than constantly reminding everyone you're responsible, and this fear of this neoliberal fear of victimhood and people sort of trying to shirk their responsibilities, why don't we make statements of solidarity, of support, acknowledge that we owe each other that support. And part of the taking responsibility is caring for other people, that I need to look after myself so I can be better service to other people, and people can be better service to me by helping me. And we have this interdependence on each other that isn't just, well, that's your problem. Oh, okay, you may not have got swimming lessons, you may have been pushed into that water, but your responsibility not to drown, that's on you. Is really that the culture we're in now? Where at the end of the day, everyone's out for themselves, everyone's on their own, or we just help those people a little bit close to us because that's good for us. Is that what we've come to? And this is what goes around online, this kind of neoliberal focus on individualism, and it's up to you, and panic that you might need someone or depend on someone and reach out for someone on any level. No, this is up to you. 100% responsibility is on you. And I just find it off-putting. So it's patronizing, but it's also just very selfish, very much like, not our problem. This is up to you. And I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good indicator of where we've come to in our healing process and our society. Good, healthy societies are built on people caring for each other. And those people who are cared for, then care for others. And we all have each other's back. We all are our brothers and sisters' keeper. We all owe a debt to each other to support each other to the best of our abilities. Now, obviously, we can't do that if we're totally destroyed ourselves. So we build ourselves up, but then we're of service, and we go through our own things. And there's this ebb and flow of giving and receiving that we shouldn't be shying away from. That we should be owning, celebrating, and standing in the power of giving to others and receiving. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this has made sense. If you've liked this, please like and subscribe. If you know someone this could benefit, please share it. I'd really appreciate that. I think it would have done me good to hear this 10 years ago when I was in that kind of sense of burden, because you read that and let's imagine you are a trauma survivor and you're coming to grips that it's not your fault. It's like you're being told off. It's so lectury, and and it creates this pressure. Get on with it. You better sort it out. Don't come asking for me for help. This is your responsibility. And I just, I read it and I just think, honestly, fuck you, whatever. So that's my little rant, my little analysis, my little critique. I'm glad you've watched the video. Please look after yourself and take care. Bye-bye.